Hello everyone and welcome to another series of Seafood Explained with Kontali. I'm Ragnar Rønning and I'm your host for today. And today we are going to take a dive into the world of warm water shrimp farming. Together with me I have Erwin Termaat from our Haag office, who luckily for us is an expert on warm water shrimps, who has worked in the industry and now is an analyst in Kontali at our Den Haag office. And please say hello, Erwin.
Yeah. Hello, Ragnar. Thank you for your introduction, and hello to all the people joining us online. Very excited for today.
Yeah, I am too, and we are gonna start into the world of warm water shrimps. And just to kind of start me off, I'm not very good at warm water shrimp. So, what kind of species are we talking about? I know the cold water ones. I've eaten them in the summer in Norway, but
Yes, let me share. So, yeah, indeed, today we are talking about warm water farmed shrimp. It's one of the products that we offer in our Edge portal to have production numbers on these species. We have quite detailed information on two of the main species, namely Vannamei and Monodon. Monodon is best known as black tiger shrimp, and Vannamei is better known as white leg shrimp or Pacific white leg shrimp. Vannamei is by far the biggest farmed species in the world, so that's what our focus will be on today.
when we're talking about Vannamei, then what regions are we talking about in farming? Then are we global or are we a specific region? Or
yeah, so indeed, when we are talking about Vannamei, we are talking about a global shrimp species, as opposed to Monodon, which is produced mainly in Asia. I will show you the regions that Vannamei is being produced. So as we can see from this graph, we can see that mainly Asia has the biggest share of Vannamei production, and then comes Latin America, and there's also some other regions that produce Vannamei shrimp.
yeah, I see there's kind of two big blocks of producers. There's Asia and Latin America. But today we're going to dive into a specific country, and you have told me since we work together that it's Latin America and Ecuador. And why do you want to highlight Ecuador?
Yeah, so as we can see from this graph, indeed Asia and Latin America are the biggest. We see some growth in Asia, but when we look at percentages, you can really see the growth of Latin America coming over the last few years. The difference between Asia and Latin America is that in Asia, there is multiple significant producing countries. We have China, India, Vietnam, multiple. When we look at Latin America, there's one driving country behind the production of Vannamei shrimp, and that's Ecuador. So that's why today we are going to dive into Ecuador, as we see tremendous growth from them over the last few years.
Yeah, and how come we have seen this tremendous growth in Ecuador? Do they do something different than the others? Are they kind of more evolved? Are they lucky? Or is it, what are the reasons?
Yeah, I would say it's because I work there, but I guess that's not the case.
Probably
not. Probably not. So we see over the last few years that Ecuador has actually become the biggest producer of Vannamei shrimp. They overtook India for this role in 2021. What makes Ecuador a good country for Vannamei farming is their physical features. They are located right on the equator, which gives them a year-round good temperature and also good water temperature, around 24 degrees, which is quite optimal for Vannamei farming. It hovers around there. Sometimes it's a degree or two lower, sometimes it's a degree or two warmer. And also what is very beneficial to them is their access to the water sources. So they are on the Pacific Ocean, and yeah, it makes it very easy for them to get good quality water in and use this in a good way.
Is it salt water or is it fresh water or brackish water, or what's their advantage there? There's a coastline in all of South America, but
yes, yeah. So indeed, with the ocean on close to their farms, there is quite some salt water coming in. But one of the biggest regions that is producing Vanamay in Ecuador is in the Guayas region, which is actually located on the Gulf of Guayas. So one of the biggest gulfs in the world. I think it's even the biggest in Latin America. This means that there's also river water coming towards there, which results in sort of a brackish water situation for a big part of the producing region in Ecuador.
Yeah, it's interesting. And you're showing this a very interesting graph from Edge here. And what are they doing since they are kind of growing so rapidly? Are they more kind of consolidated? Is it a more kind of advanced industry than India, which is, you know, there's a lot of people, there's a lot of space, but still you see Ecuador with this phenomenal growth. What's the difference between India and Ecuador that you're showing here then?
Yeah, so India started earlier with Vanamay farming, but what they have is more of a smallholder systems as well, as opposed to Ecuador, where there is more large farms, and they are indeed quite consolidated. So they are quite advanced in their ways. And in general, the country has a good focus on Vanamay production. We see that with certain organizations that monitor all aspects of the industry, which makes it so that these large farms can really intensify their production in the sense of technologification, electrification, aerations, that kind of stuff, which makes it that they can really be efficient in their use of the ponds they have.
Yeah, as you see from the last the 3 years you're showing here, they've grown from 750 to 1.2 million tons, and I'm guessing there's a market behind it as well. Where do Ecuador kind of supply these volumes? Is it? I guess they don't eat them themselves.
No, indeed, the Vanamay consumption in Ecuador is not as high as you would expect, even though they make some quite good ceviche and cazuela. But no, indeed, it's quite low domestic consumption. The market that's really behind it is China. Yeah, so this is a graph of exports of shrimp products from Ecuador. And yeah, you can really see the market for China is there. And then there is also quite a significant amount going to the US and the EU. But China really is the driving factor. And especially this year after COVID, you see that, yeah, they are substantial.
What does this make to kind of the market dynamics when you have this one producer with this phenomenal growth, and it's just not tens of thousands of tons, it's hundreds of thousands? Is that the price is stable, or are they fluctuating, or is it cheaper to buy? You can know the answer, but you're probably going to tell me that.
Yes. Yes. So indeed, Ecuador is producing such high amounts that actually a lot of the industry would say they are overproducing. Yeah, and even in China, demand is going down slightly, which means that prices are not as good as Ecuador would want them, which I can show in the graph we have here. This is also a product of our Edge portal. So this shows farm gate prices, the prices that a farmer would get for their shrimp. If we look at what's happening in 2021, we see that for the larger shrimp, prices would be at $7. If we look at what's happening today, we see larger shrimp would be at $3.50. This is a problem for Ecuador, as they are they are selling their shrimp for quite a low margin. And with all this overproduction, China really has to absorb all these shrimp for them. This is also something we've heard in the last few weeks, that there are containers going from Ecuador being exported to China, while the shrimp in the containers aren't even sold yet, or they will be sold for a very, very low price. So this low price that we are seeing now with the overproduction that Ecuador is showing, this price is not going up in the foreseeable future.
So we actually see a stock building and big warehouses of shrimp, because this is a frozen product, I guess. It's only frozen when it's shipped.
Indeed. What Ecuador is shipping mainly is frozen hoso shrimp. That means shrimp with the head and shell still on. This is also something that's really of interest to the Chinese market, as opposed to like what we see coming from India, where it's more of a not really value added, but there's also headless shrimp or even value added products, which are way more interesting to a US market and EU market.
Yeah, but how are the rest of the kind of producers tackling these issues with the dropping prices and increasing volumes from Ecuador? I guess Ecuador is, you said, the most consolidated producer or country, and you have those smaller farmers in India or Vietnam. Are they kind of, what's their margins? Are they making money now, or are any of them making money? That's the question.
Yeah, so this whole situation with Ecuador is indeed bringing prices down also on a global scale, making it very tough for global shrimp farmers, Panama farmers. So indeed in Asia, with these smallholder farmers, we see that they are also struggling. At this moment, we believe they are still making a margin, but the whole situation is tough for them, and this might lead to some reduction in production in the future, as they will try to find other ways to make money.
So you won't see kind of bankruptcy, you will see just reducing their production, or do you expect to see consolidations in India or Asia in general, as you have seen in Ecuador? Or?
We think that the Asian market is less prone to this consolidation because of the whole culture behind it. But so what I personally think is that when another option comes for them, another species or anything like that, that would be more more opportunistic for them.
Yeah, so they just switch species instead of competing with Ecuador, they just produce something else. They're more flexible in that kind of way as well.
Yeah, so what you see, for example, also in Asia, is that monodon was always a big species. It's a very resilient species, which can also be grown quite well by them. And we see a sort of resurgence. It's by far not as big as Panama is, but there might be a switch to that species for at least a small amount of the farmers.
Yeah, we're talking a bit about production and flexibility here, and also it's kind of a very kind of fast-growing species, and it's a seasonality in it as well. But when you read the news about South America now, and I'm all guys with interested in the pelagic fisheries, it's El Niño, and will this affect the shrimp farmers in Ecuador in any way?
Yeah, I really believe it will. What El Niño is causing in South America is that there's a lot of extreme rainfall. So the direct effects of El Niño in Ecuador will be higher water levels in the rivers, but also because of extreme rainfall, more flash flooding. That will be really impactful to the industry.
But this is not just a Latin American occurrence, El Niño. It affects the Asian producers as well. But do you think we'll see kind of a drop in production, or they will affect the quality, or?
Yeah, so indeed, it affects the whole shrimp producing globally. The effects are different. So what we see happen in South America is different from Asia. There's a lot of Asian countries where actually El Nino is causing it to be a more dry year. At this moment, yeah, there's Asian producing countries that are seeing their ponds with higher evaporation, so lower water level in the ponds, more algae growth, all that kind of stuff. But what is happening in Ecuador is that, well, direct effects of El Nino are that the rainfall will have an effect on salinity. So the farmers that are operating at a little higher salinity level, they will see drops in salinity when when the rainfall comes, because of course the rainfall will be fresh water. And another important direct effect of El Nino will be drops in temperature. So rainfall is almost always cooler than the water that is in the ponds. When this rainfall comes, yeah, the temperature will fluctuate, and this will have a direct effect on the shrimp in the pond, as that may cause stress and lead to disease outbreaks.
So they're more concerned about diseases than growth rate when it comes to drops in temperature and salinity.
Yes, so this El Nino season is happening. Actually, we see reports from CNA that they expect it to start actually today as we speak. But it will go on until probably until April, and it will be, as forecasted, a strong El Nino year. Yeah, but this strong El Nino year coincides with the season where temperatures normally go up in Ecuador. With temperatures going up, we see higher growth rates. But also, this temperatures going up together with the rainfall will mean higher temperature fluctuations. So the main concern there is the stress and the disease related to that, opposed to growth rates, as they might actually increase with higher temperatures.
So when you're looking at, it's almost the last month of Q4 here now, but how do you see production coming into to Christmas? And I can ask you about Q1 afterwards, but you can comment Q4 first. Talking about Ecuador.
Yeah, so in Ecuador, what we are seeing now is that farms are still stocking at their normal levels, also same stocking densities, maybe even a bit more intense, because this year has been quite good on the seas so far. And temperatures are a bit higher than they were last year. So actually, my expectation for Q4 is that production will be slightly higher than last year, especially because the rainfall is not currently happening, but might be more intense going forward. And I think that's more interesting. So for Q4, I think production will be similar or slightly higher even than last year.
So, and then you said you think it will change. So now I'm definitely going to ask, what about Q1 then next year?
Yeah, it's hard to say, because we see that with seasonality in shrimp farming, especially in Ecuador, in Q1 and Q2 of the year, temperatures are at their highest. So normally that's when they produce most. But there's also a part in Q1 where it's still the rainy season. If this coincides with the extreme rainfall events that are being caused by El Nino, with the flash flooding, all these kinds of things, we might see damage to infrastructure, to logistical ways. And I think that might actually be the biggest struggle for Ecuador in the coming months, especially in Q1. As if we see, for example, farms that not have their pond walls reinstated, or have not as good infrastructure on their farm, with the dirt roads, all that kind of stuff, that might really impact the farmers in Ecuador. Yeah, and what I also think would be a problem is that, well, what we are seeing now, that logistical roads, so roads close to the larvae producing centers, for example, are already almost being washed away because of the higher water levels. If we see problems with that, that would really impact production, as it will be more difficult to get larvae into your ponds. It's something that we have to wait and see. We are not sure, of course, which flood will happen, and that's really interesting to keep an eye on, but I can't say for sure at this moment what will happen.
Yeah, but do you think this will kind of lead to in Q1 and probably into Q2, then that we are seeing diminishing stocks in on the warehouses in China or US with all the shrimps they are kind of buying now? So it might help prices in the long term. Or?
It might, if production goes down. So it's really something that we have to keep an eye on, and that's why we try to gain insights always from people in the industry, to have as much up-to-date information on that as possible.
Yeah, to start to try to sum up this very short session, 7.5 an hour, but we talked about it's kind of not a battle, but it's Asia and Latin America when we talk to production, and we're really talking about Ecuador against the rest, which are the main producers. But Ecuador with this phenomenal growth, it's when I come from salmon industry, that the limiting factor for growth is to produce and the space to do it in. So is this a limiting factor for shrimp farming as well, or is it endless with areas to produce in Ecuador or India?
Yeah, what we see for now, especially in Ecuador with land use for shrimp farming, is that the ponds that are there, we estimated around 225,000 hectares. Yeah, there's these ponds are being used, but there is smaller farmers that are being bought up by the bigger guys. Yeah, with this whole consolidation that we mentioned before. And when these smaller farmers are being taken over by the bigger guys, we see that the land that is there is being used more intense. So there's more technologification, aeration, automatic feeding, all this kind of stuff. So for now, especially in Ecuador, what I see happening is that the land is staying quite similar, but there's more production on the same area.
Yeah, so there's still kind of room for this phenomenal growth going further, like in 24 and 25.
I believe that Ecuador, even with the imminent effects of El Nino and the concerns about it, I think they will still keep their growth and they will keep going strong.
Yeah, so watch out, they're not here to kind of back down, so it's the others who have to catch up.
Yeah,
and we should eat a lot of Vannamei. Yeah. No, I think we're coming to an end with this seminar. So to summed up a bit, but thank you for trying to explain this to me. It's very fascinating and interesting. But we see huge growing volumes in Vannamei in total, and the main part of this growth is Ecuador, which the phenomenal growth, especially over the last 3 years. And the biggest offtake of this growth is China, and especially after opening up after COVID, where they are going to have the capacity to eat it. But they're also now trending toward an overproduction, where there's being built stocks on warehouses in Asia and probably the US as well with frozen shrimps, and this affects the prices quite heavily. It's almost a half in price over the last year. And you see that the El Nino will mildly, or if not at all, affected in Q4, but Q1 will be some interesting to see. But still, you think 24 is looking bright for Ecuador as you see it now.
Yes, indeed. And there's one thing I want to highlight is that we keep on touch with industry sources also in Ecuador on this El Nino phenomenon, what is happening. And that's something that we always will have in our portal as well. We will have regular updates on what's happening in production, analyze this, give an outlook. So we are always up to date with our information and try to give a good estimation of what will happen and inform the people.
Yeah. And to everyone who's been watching the webinar today, after the webinars, there will come an email where we have a recording of the webinar, and there will also be a link to get a free trial to Edge, which is the portal that Erwin has been used to show the trends and data for shrimp production, which we produce here in Kontali. So until next time, thank you very much, Erwin. It was very enlightening, and I think you explained it to me in a way that I understood it as well. And to everyone's listening, thank you, and feel free to come back with questions if there's something you didn't understand. Erwin will answer. Bye-bye,
Yes.
and thank you for now.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.